The restaurant buzzed with energy, the sounds of clinking silverware and low conversation filling the air. It wasn't just a place where people came to eat, it was a place where every guest felt valued. Chris, the owner, stood in the center of it all, his eyes scanning the room, making sure everything was running smoothly. He was proud of what he had built, but tonight something felt off. Angela, his mother, sat quietly by the window, watching everything unfold with a calm and steady gaze. She had seen Chris grow from a young boy with big dreams to the man who now ran this restaurant with purpose. Tonight, however, her focus was on something else, something that could threaten everything they had worked for. Emily, one of the servers, moved quickly between tables, but there was a tense energy around her. She wasn't just any employee, she was someone who had worked here long enough to know the ropes. But tonight, something had changed. Chris noticed it right away. There was an unspoken shift in the air, and he could feel the weight of it wasn't just the regular dinner rush that was stressing everyone out. It was Emily's attitude. She had been showing signs of frustration all evening. She snapped at customers, and it was clear her mood was affecting the rest of the team. Chris could sense that something needed to be done. He wasn't just running a restaurant. He was running a place where respect and teamwork were the foundation of everything. But respect, like anything else, had to be earned, and tonight, Emily was about to learn that. Chris took a deep breath, knowing that the conversation he was about to have would change everything for her in the restaurant. The tension in the air grew thicker as Chris gathered the staff in the dining room. He could feel their nervous eyes on him. Everyone had heard the whispers, the rumors, and now it was time to face the problem head-on. Angela, still seated near the window, watched carefully, knowing this was a moment of reckoning. She had seen her son grow, and now he was going to face one of his hardest challenges yet. Emily stood at the back of the group, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She kept her eyes down, avoiding the gazes of her coworkers. She knew something was coming. The whispers about her behavior had already spread throughout the restaurant, and she could feel the judgment in the room. But Emily wasn't one to back down. She had her pride, and she wasn't about to admit she had done anything wrong, even if the others thought she had. Chris stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I need to address something that happened tonight," he said, scanning the room. What happened was wrong. This restaurant was built on respect. We treat everyone equally here, guests and staff alike. When we fail to do that, we fail as a team. A few of the staff members nodded, understanding where Chris was going with this. But Emily's jaw tightened and she shifted uncomfortably, clearly not ready to accept responsibility. She'd been working at this restaurant for a long time, and she knew what Chris stood for. But in that moment, she wasn't ready to admit that her actions had crossed the line. Chris's eyes locked onto Emily. Tonight, a customer was disrespected, ignored. "That's not okay, and it's not the kind of place we run here," he said, his voice unwavering. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but Chris raised a hand, silencing her. "Not yet," he said, his eyes serious. "You'll have your chance." As Emily stood there, the weight of Chris's words hung in the air. She could feel her face flush with shame, but she couldn't take back what had already been said. It was too late now. Chris wasn't backing down. The silence in the room was deafening, as all eyes were on Emily, waiting for her response. But nothing came. She opened her mouth, trying to find the right words, but they wouldn't come. Then, Angela spoke up. "An apology doesn't mean much if you don't take responsibility for your actions," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't just make a mistake, Emily. You chose to treat someone badly. And you've got to own that if you ever want to make things right." Emily shifted uncomfortably under Angela's gaze, her arms wrapped tightly around her chest. She didn't know how to respond. She knew deep down that Angela was right. Her words and actions had been harsh. But admitting that out loud felt like admitting defeat. Chris stepped forward, his tone softening just a bit. "It's not about what you meant, Emily. It's about what you did," he said. "You have to face the reality of the harm you caused. And you have to decide whether you'll take this lesson seriously." Emily's eyes filled with frustration. "I already said I'm sorry. What more do you want from me?" she snapped. Her voice trembled with anger and regret. Angela sighed and shook her head. "You can't just say sorry and expect everything to be okay," she said. You need to prove it through your actions, not just words. There was a long pause. Emily looked around the room, her heart sinking. She could feel the distance between her and the others now. They weren't going to just let her off the hook. And Chris had already made it clear that her behavior couldn't be ignored. "I'm sorry," Emily finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." But Chris was firm. "I know you're sorry, but you've had chances before. This is where it ends." A week passed, and things at the restaurant were different. Emily was gone, but the tension in the air lingered. Chris had made sure that everyone on the team understood what had happened and why it was necessary. But Angela could see that Chris wasn't completely at peace. He still carried the weight of what had happened. One night, after most of the customers had left, Angela sat at her usual table, sipping her tea. She noticed Chris walking toward her, his shoulders slumped. He looked worn out, his face tight with the stress of the past week. "Everything okay?" Angela asked, setting her cup down and studying him closely. Chris sighed and sat down across from her. "I don't know, Mom," he said. "It just feels like no matter what I do, I can't stop thinking about Emily. I keep wondering if I could have handled it differently." Angela shook her head, her expression soft but firm. "You did what you had to do, Chris. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy. It's never easy." She paused, giving him a small, knowing smile. "But you stood by your values. That's what matters." Chris glanced at the empty dining room, a small frown on his face. "I know. But it still feels like I failed her somehow. Like I missed an opportunity to help her." Angela reached across the table and placed a hand over his. "You gave her plenty of chances. But she has to make the choice to change. And you can't make that choice for her. What you can do is keep living by the values that are important to you. That's what will guide you forward." Chris nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Yeah, I guess you're right. I just hope she learned something from it." Angela smiled. "You gave her the truth. What she does with it is on her. But remember, it's not just about teaching her, it's about teaching everyone else." As the days passed, Chris began to feel more at peace with his decision. Emily was gone, but the lessons she left behind still hung in the air. He kept reminding himself that he had done what was best for the restaurant and his team. He couldn't change the past, but he could make sure the future stayed on the right track. One evening, Angela came into the restaurant and noticed the change. Chris seemed more relaxed, his usual tension gone. He was smiling more and talking with the staff in a way that showed he was back in control. The team was stronger now. They had seen Chris take a stand, and that made them believe in his leadership even more. As Angela sat down at her usual table, she watched Chris greet a new customer with his usual warmth. She noticed how his confidence had grown, how his values had shaped the way the restaurant ran. There was a strength in him that hadn't been there before. "Mom," Chris said, walking over to her. "I think we're on the right path now. The team is back to working together, and the customers can feel it." Angela smiled and nodded. "I've noticed. It's like you've become the leader you were always meant to be." Chris's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I didn't think I had it in me to let someone go like that. But I knew I had to. I hope Emily can see it now, that it wasn't just about her. It was about what we stand for." Angela gave him a proud look. "You're showing your team what matters. That's what a good leader does." Chris smiled, feeling the weight of the past few weeks lift off his shoulders. He had done the right thing. The restaurant was stronger, and so was he. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about creating an environment where everyone could thrive, respect each other, and grow together.